Hello, hello. So it is Tuesday. We're like getting halfway into November, and my family and I are out here in Orlando doing all the fun Orlando, Florida stuff this week. But I definitely wanted to get on here and get this done. So today we are going into Module 4, which is the leadership module. And I can't think of anyone better. Good morning, Jennifer. I can't think of anyone better to lead this module than John Maxwell. John Maxwell's authored over 70 books and just an incredible guy. He was actually mentored by Jim Rohn and mentored by John Wooden. So let me share this screen and you can hear it from him.
Hi, my name's John Maxwell. I'm so happy to be here today with you and to be a part of this exciting series, Foundations for Success. My friends at Success invited me to introduce this module on leadership because I was recently named the most influential leadership authority in the world, and because I've been told that I've written more books on leadership than any author in the world, which means I'm old. And even with my busy schedule, I was happy to say yes to helping with this incredible series because I have so much respect for Jim Rohn. He was a gifted teacher and a beautiful human being. So I felt compelled to help honor his legacy and share some of the life lessons that I have learned from him. And that's why I'm spending time here today with you. Whenever I'm asked what my favorite Jim Rohn lesson is, I really have to think about it because Jim's teaching was so solid, it was so practical. But I think one of the greatest things Jim taught was that we should never stop learning. In the previous module, Brian Tracy described Jim as an eternal student, and that is absolutely true. Jim practiced what he preached. He had a never-ending desire to learn, and no matter how successful he became, no matter what he achieved, no matter how many skills he acquired, or how much knowledge he absorbed, Jim still wanted to keep on learning. That's modeling that we should all try to follow. I hope you keep that in your mind as you learn from this module on leadership. Why is leadership so important to me? Why do I think it's also important to you? It's because everything rises and falls on leadership. You probably know this instinctively. You probably worked for both good leaders and bad leaders. When the leader is good, everything gets better. When the leader is bad, everything gets worse. Organizations rise and fall on their leadership, and so do teams and families, even entire nations. And here's why. Let's say that your leadership is a 5 on the scale of 10. If you're a 5, your success will never be any higher than a 4. Your leadership is what it is. It's the lid of your success. I call this the law of lid in my 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. You see, if your leadership is a 5, then your department, your organization, your team, whatever you lead, will only be a 4. But here's the good news. Leadership can be learned. And if your natural leadership ability is a 5, it doesn't have to stay there. If you're willing to work at it, you can raise your leadership level to a 6 or a 7, or maybe even an 8. If your natural leadership is a 7, you can increase it to an 8 or 9. And what happens to your organization or team? It can rise up with it. It's like this. If my leadership is a 5, then my business, my organization is going to be a 4. But as I go from a 5 to a 6 to a 7 to 8, as I lift that lid, now there's room for my organization, my business, to just literally grow and follow that. You see, if you're not a leader now, you could become one. And if you're already a leader, you could become a better one. If you're already leading people, how do you know how you're doing? Look at your people. If they're motivated, energetic, and productive, if they're working together toward a common vision, then you're probably doing pretty well. And if they're not, then you have an opportunity to grow. In this module, Jim talks about how leaders must be strong without being rude, kind without being weak, proud without being arrogant, and humble without being timid. Most people don't inherently know how to do this, so they have to learn how. And I believe you will learn wonderful insights in this lesson. You can become more effective in your leadership. Remember what Jim taught. Human beings can change because we have the ability to make choices. Every other form of life is driven by instinct. But as human beings, we have the capacity to make choices that can change our lives for the better. And as you'll soon learn in this module, Jim teaches that wishing and hoping for change isn't enough. As he says, if you want things to change for you, then you must consider that perhaps you should change. So embrace this opportunity to learn and be willing to do the work necessary to become a better leader, even if it requires you to make some uncomfortable adjustments and accept some new ways of doing things. Let me give you a quick example. Several years ago, I spoke to a large audience of corporate CEOs, presidents, and other top leaders during a leadership training seminar. At one point, I told the leaders that they should share their weaknesses with their people. Whoa! Whew. The crowd wasn't ready to hear that, and I could tell most of them were resistant to the whole idea. After the session was over, an executive approached me and said, I appreciated most of what you said up there, but I have to tell you, I really disagree with the part about leaders having to share their weaknesses with their people. He went on to tell me about how leadership was about appearing strong, showing confidence, and never letting people see you sweat. And I just let him talk. Then I said, I think you're making a wrong assumption. You're assuming that your people don't already know your weaknesses, but they do. You're not telling them because they don't know. You're telling them so that they know that you know. And when you finally admit your weaknesses, they're going to say, great, he knows, thank goodness. Now, maybe we can get somewhere. You see, one of the most important things any leader can do is to accept reality. You can't lead others effectively if you don't. You can't even lead yourself. So you need to start there. Jim put it this way. Figure out how it really is and not wish that it was different. Once you do, you can start building. You can start learning. You can start improving. You can start becoming the leader you've always wanted to be. In this module, Jim is going to share with you some of the basic truths of leadership that are really going to help you. Listen in. Take some notes. Be alert for lessons that will help you improve, and don't be quick to dismiss them. Be quick to adopt them. Start making the changes that make you a better leader. I want to thank you for making the choice to focus on developing yourself. I know you're going to learn a great deal from Jim in this module, whether you're already in a position of leadership or have a goal to one day be a leader of a great influence. And now, here's Jim.
Here's the real challenge for leadership. Leadership is the challenge to be something more than mediocre. The challenge to be something more than mediocre. It was said of Abraham Lincoln, when his mother died, he was at her bedside when she died, and her last words to him were, "Be somebody, Abe." And if that story's true, he must have taken it to heart. Be somebody. That's a good challenge. Be somebody. Be somebody wise. Be somebody strong. Strength is attractive. Be somebody kind. All of the attributes of leadership are a unique challenge. Now here's the real key. Learn to be strong but not rude. There's always the thin line you have to watch to make sure you don't cross. Learn to be strong but not rude. The challenge is to be kind but not weak. Learn to be bold but not a bully. The challenge is to be humble but not timid. Be thoughtful but not lazy. Learn to be proud but not arrogant. That's a challenge. Learn to have humor without folly. It's okay to tell funny stories, but the key in leadership is don't be silly, right? There's a difference between being silly and having humor. Okay, that's the challenge of leadership. Now, leadership should understand the 20%, 80% rule. And the 20%, 80% rule, I don't know exactly where it came from, but if you're going to be involved with people any amount of time or any number of people from whatever walks of life, you've got to understand what we call the 20%, 80% rule. And if you haven't heard it before, let me give it to you. The 20%, 80% rule says, it seems like 20% of the people do 80% of the business, and 80% of the people do 20%. It's just one of those strange things about life. And we can ask whys all day long. A lot of things you don't ask why. Let the obvious be your best teacher. Almost any enterprise, right? Whether it's a business or a club or whatever. Sure enough, 20% of the people do 80%, 80% do 20%. Ask the minister of the church, right? Who picks up the tab here? I'll bet you he will say, well, let's see, about 20% of the people pick up 80% of the tab. And 80% pick up 20%. It's just one of those interesting statistics about life, okay? Now, once you understand the 20%, 80% rule, here's what you must learn to do as a leader. Don't try to change it. This is not something you change. This is something you work with. See, there's a lot of things in life you don't change. You don't say, I think I'll take fall and put it after winter. Say, no. See, that's too difficult. You don't change fall around and put it after winter. You leave it where it is. But you learn to work with it like it is. Okay? The best beginning for any successful venture is reality. Let's figure out how it really is. And not kid ourselves. And not wish it was different. Okay, so we take the 20%, 80% rule like it is, and we learn to work with it. Now, here's some of the key points in understanding the 20%, 80% rule. If you wish to affect your business 80%, you must work with the 20%. It's just one of those things you just learn to work with. To affect your business 80%, you work with the 20% that are creating 80% of the business. Now, let me give you a unique part of life. The pull is in the opposite direction. And it always is. Here's what success is. Success is learning to move in the opposite direction of the normal negative pull. Success is just overcoming the normal negative downward trend. Because I guess that's what life was meant to be. Overcoming the normal negative downward pull. Success is moving in the opposite direction. Life that springs from the seed really is moving in the opposite direction. Gravity wants to pull the seed down, but sure enough, the seed being pulled down by the soil takes root, comes to life, right? Comes to life, takes root, starts to grow, and which way does it grow? Up, right? It gets the roots and the nourishment, but it grows up. It pushes its way against gravity, right? It moves up, and that's what success is. That's what life is, of movement in the opposite direction. So, guess who wants 80% of your attention? The wrong percentage. The 80% of whatever enterprise you're working with, you got a group of people going, 80% of them want 80% of your time. They say, well, we're the 80%. But see, you've got to learn to resist that. Now, you do it diplomatically. You do it with intelligence. But if you want to be successful, you got to do it. Okay? You've got to give 80% of your time to the 20% and 20% of your time to the 80%. Somebody says, well, now how do you do that? Well, now here's where you got to get smart. Here's what I learned to do with the 20%, 80% rule. I learned to give the 20% individual time and the 80% group time. I just figured that out. I say, well, these 80% are only producing 20% of the business. So I've got to figure out a way to talk to them by groups. Now I can talk to an individual that's doing the high production, but I can only talk to the groups and these collection of people that are doing the small production. Okay? Now guess who wants your individual time? The wrong percentage. What you got to do is just diplomatically move in the opposite direction. You just diplomatically learn how to just give the group time to the 80%, individual time to the 20%. Now this is not something you fight, it's something you work with. Guy says, oh, I got it made, here's what I will do. I'll just eliminate the 80%. Right? They're only getting 20% of the business anyway. I'll just get rid of them. And I'll just keep the 20%. Well, you can do that, but here's what will happen pretty soon. The people that you've got left after you have fired the 80%, sure enough, 20% of them will be doing 80% of the business. And 80% will be doing 20%. This is like the seasons. This is not something you try to rearrange. This is something you get smart enough to work with. Now, every leader must have some listening time to what's going on in the field, what's happening with the people. Here's what you must do with your listening time. You must give 80% of your listening time to the 20%. And 20% of your listening time to the 80%. Now, guess who wants 80% of your listening time? The wrong percentage. So you just have to learn to be diplomatic. Okay? It's incredible. This is something you learn to work with and not against. Now, what you do is just learn to capitalize on the way things are. To create the market, most people buy when it's high and sell when it's low. Right? That's normal. That's the normal scare. That's the normal being uneasy. Buy when it's high, sell when it's low. Guess who becomes wealthy? The people who move in the opposite direction. Now that takes tremendous strength of will, capacity, and knowledge. And it doesn't mean you hit it every time, but it does mean your chances are much better to buy when it's low, sell when it's high. Right? That's what success is. Success is moving in the opposite of the normal negative downward pull. But what's unique about human enterprise is unique things can be accomplished by understanding the world setup, understanding how people are, and learning how to work with it and not against it.
Awesome. Man, there was some good stuff in that. So as we get into this topic on leadership, one of my favorite topics, and Jim Rohn and John Maxwell are two of my very favorite people of all time when it comes to leadership. So one of the first things that I wrote down here John Maxwell has written more leadership books than anyone in the entire world. That's a pretty strong statement. And I know he's written over 70, so just an incredible. He says we should never stop learning, be an eternal student. Everything rises and falls on leadership. When the leader is good, everything is better. And when poor, then everything is worse. And you guys have probably all experienced that in your life. Maybe in It Works, maybe in other jobs you've had. I know when I was in the military for 11 years, I had all kinds of different leadership, and probably 2 out of 10 were incredible. And the whole entire unit thrived and everything went great. And then I probably had 2 out of 10 that were flat out horrible, and everyone was miserable because of that. And so we have to keep that in mind as we're growing our teams. And the law of the lid. I mean, the law of the lid forces us to look in the mirror and do a checkup from the neck up and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is my leadership? And it's up to us to grow our leadership and put ourselves in a position to learn from here, learn from our uplines, and It Works, and just put ourselves in front of good information as often as possible. And just ask yourself the question, how are you doing as a leader? And from time to time, reach out to your team and have an open, what we would call in the military, an open door policy. Make yourself approachable where it's safe for your team to be able to come to you when they're frustrated, and be able to share with you why, so that you know, because I would think most of you would want to know what people are thinking of you instead of maybe them just talking behind your back. So make sure that you have that type of safe environment where people can come to you if they're upset, if they're frustrated, and let you know, because that's part of the growing process, is understanding what our weaknesses are. And I love when they say leadership is being strong without being rude, being kind but not being weak, bold but not a bully, thoughtful but not lazy, proud but not arrogant, having humor without folly. There's very delicate balance between those words, and that's very important. I think part of the leadership growing process is understanding the difference. And it's an ongoing revelation, right? As we understand, a lot of you are on here, you have a certain type of personality. You know, maybe you're very yellow, right? Or maybe you're very red. A very yellow person and a very red person look at the exact same circumstances in a much different way. So we have to understand not just how we see something, but we have to understand how other people on our team see the same thing, because you know, if you're looking at one side of a quarter, it looks one way. If you're looking at the other side of the quarter, it looks another way. But both ways are right. I love the picture. If you've ever read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's a seek first to understand before you want to be understood is one of the habits, right? And it shows the picture. You guys have probably seen it. And it asks, is this a picture of the old lady or a young woman? And there's both an old lady and a young woman in the picture. But some people only see the old lady. Other people only see the young woman. So if that's all you see, you could argue over that all day. Whereas someone else can come in and go, I see the old lady and I see the young woman. You're both right. So sometimes we might approach a situation and we think we're right about it, but if 10, 15, 20 other people look at the same situation and see it differently, then who's really right? You know what I mean? We have to be open-minded, and we have to learn to see a situation through the eyes of a yellow personality, a red personality, blue personality, green, because it's all people, and our way isn't always the only way. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. So don't be afraid to share your weaknesses. I love that John Maxwell, I'm sure he got some people very uncomfortable when he started talking about sharing our weaknesses. That takes a very strong person to be able to admit where we're weak. I know I've been in different job interviews in the past. When I was interviewing to become an officer in the military, they said, what are 3 areas that you're weakest in? And I had to, whoa, what? And think about that and share that, situations that I wish I would have handled differently and that sort of thing. So those are important things to think about, because when we can identify those, we can grow from those, not make the same mistakes over and over and keep going around the same mountain, running into the same tests that we keep failing over and over and over. So a big part of that is just to reach out, ask your spouse, hey, honey, what's an area that you feel like I could grow in? Ask your kids, how could I be a better mother or father to you? Ask your teammate how you're doing. And, when you ask the right people, they'll let you know, right? If you ask a yellow, they'll just be, oh, you're amazing. But if you ask a red, they'll tell you flat out exactly what they think right there in that second. So moving on to let's see, moving on to when Jim Rohn got on there, and the challenge of leadership is to be something more than mediocre. There's this constant pressure for us to just be average. There's a constant pressure for us to drift. That's the easy way in life, right? It's the easy way. It's the way that away from confrontation. It's just the easy way to flow through life is just to kind of go with the flow. And that's what the majority of people do. That's why you hear it's lonely at the top, right? And you hear that sort of thing. As you're climbing up a mountain, as you get higher and higher in altitude, you'll see less and less people. You'll see less and less life because most people don't hang out. That's why they call it rare air, right? You'll hear Mark Pentecost talk about rare air in the company. And I love that he brought up the 20%, 80% rule. I think of it like this. In It Works, exposure is everything. The fortune is in the follow-up, and you have to work with the willing. Okay. And that phrase, work with the willing, is so important because if you try and work with the unwilling, you waste a bunch of time. If you try and work with the unteachable, you waste a lot of time. If you try and work with the ones that aren't willing to work and you're trying to drag them, you waste a lot of time. Your time and my time is valuable. It's more valuable than money because we can never get the time back. Every minute I spend away from my wife and kids is a minute that's away from my wife and kids. So we all should want to use our time as valuably as we possibly can. And so this is a huge part of that, the 20%, 80% rule. It's not something we can change. It's something we can work with. And it's just the way that it is. If you look across your organization, let's say you have 100 people on your organization, 20 of them are probably going to do 80% of the enrollments. And it's just the way it is, right? We can't adjust it. We can't change it. So when you identify that, then like Jim said, you want to work with the group, the 80% as group. That's why we have team pages. That's why we have team Zooms. That's why Mark gets on there and does the corporate Zoom. We have different things that we can plug people into, the website, the training in the back office, all these things that you can plug the 80% into because you can't spend one-on-one time as your team starts growing. You can't spend one-on-one time with everybody. So how in this business do you identify, or maybe you're asking today, how maybe you feel like you're part of the 80%. How do you become, because I remember at one point I was part of the 80%, and I had to ask myself the question, how do I become part of the 20%? Because I wanted to be the 20%. I wanted to get the attention of my upline and earn one-on-one time with them, right? So here's some ways that you can guarantee that you're part of the 20%. And if you already are, then you can identify the 20% on your team. One is, are you doing steps to success each month? If you're doing steps to success, that automatically puts you in the top 20% of the entire company, right? And I guarantee that puts you in the top 20% of your entire team. And as a leader, you are leading the way. So I love that as the blueprint. When you figure out how to do steps to success yourself consistently, like we've never had anyone on our entire team ever in 6+ years that's done steps to success 12 months in a row and not been at least double diamond. I don't even think it's possible. Steps to success, 12 months in a row. That means what? That you recruit 3 distributors a month and 4 loyals a month. And so that would be 36, right? 36 distributors you recruited personally. I mean, that's almost a double diamond single-handedly. But here's what's cool is when you start doing steps to success, someone on your team will start doing it with you. Because remember that law of the lid? If you're not doing steps to success, it's difficult because that means someone has to get past you, which is possible. We've had that happen. Maybe they plug in with your upline. But if you're not doing it, then you should be growing yourself so that you're figuring that out. Okay, so important. So that's one way, steps to success. Hey, everyone on your team that signed up for conference, I guarantee you less than 20%, if you went through your whole entire team, less than 20% of your team signed up for conference. So that's a huge win. That's someone who's serious, right, who's signed up for conference. Someone who's promoted on their own. You know, if someone goes out there and recruits 2 distributors and they help them become 400 legs and they become an executive, they are moving into the top 20% of your organization. That's a great way. So you can print off your promotion report and you can look at that and see who is moving into the top 20% in your organization. You that are on this Zoom, if you're up this early, just the fact that you're hungry and you're plugging in and you're teachable, that would mean that you're moving into the 20% on your team. You recommend a book to somebody and they get it, guess what? Only about 20%, maybe. I think Jim Rohn says 10%. He could say, hey, read this book and you'll be wealthy in 5 years. 10% will get it. 10%. So when you recommend to your team, hey, go out there and buy this, and you say, hey, post a picture if you bought that book, and they did, put a little check mark next to their name, because they are becoming part of the 20% because they're teachable. Showing up. We say when we do interviews for potential distributors, we ask them, or we tell them our requirements to be on our team is that you have to be teachable, you have to be willing to work, and you have to have some ambition. And if we feel like that person is not teachable, or they're not willing to work, or they don't have any ambition, then we really don't have time to work with them, and we want to convert them into becoming a loyal customer, and maybe things will change in their life to where they become teachable. Because if you don't have those three things, those three ingredients in your brand new team member, then it's probably not going to work out for them. So why should we waste our time working with that person if they're not teachable, they're not willing to work, or they don't have what I would call a burning desire, or some ambition, or some passion, something they want to move towards? If everyone's fine with the way their life is right now, then there's really no point in them joining It Works. They might as well just become a customer and use the products, right? And then they could refer people to you that maybe would love to work this business. So success is moving in the right direction. So working with that 80-20, and it never really changes regardless of what business you're in or organization you're in. It's normally 80% are going to do 20% of the work, and 20% are going to do 80% of the work. And the 20% should get the individual time, the 80% the group time, because you can't work with. Now, if you're a Ruby right now and you only have 5 team members, hey, you can talk to all of them every day, right? But as you grow, and what I've seen before in the past is someone will do the whole thing all by themselves and build a diamond, sometimes even double diamond. But then you feel like you have 3 full-time jobs. You didn't join this to have 3 full-time jobs. You joined this so that you can create leverage, and so that you can create residual income, so that you can go on vacation for a month and come back and your check may be going up because of what you've built and who you've trained and the leadership that you have in place. So super important. So last thing I wrote down here is success is moving in the opposite direction of the negative opposite pole. It's like gravity is always trying to push us down, right? It's like there's this constant life pressure that's trying to push us down. So we have to fight that to grow. We have to fight that because we're separating ourselves. When you start to separate yourself from the 80% and become the 20%, and it starts to become a less and less and less of a crowd, it's like those crab. You probably heard the story about you take a bucket of crabs. If you have one crab in the bucket, it can climb out of the bucket easily, right? But when you have a bucket of crabs and that one crab tries to climb out, the other crabs reach up and try and pull them down. So you'll feel that when you're going from the 80% to the 20%, you'll feel the pressure of some friends and some family. That's why you got to kind of pay attention to who's cheering you on as you become successful in life, and who's trying to pull you back down to where they're at because it's uncomfortable for them to see their friend or their relative or whoever changing and stepping out this way. And we all go through this process, right? We all have people in our life that will try and pull us down. And then we have people who come into our life that want to pull us up, right? So it's important to identify that and understand who you're becoming in that relationship. How is that relationship affecting you? So, hey, we got like 15 more minutes. I want to hear from a few of you guys. So let me see here. I see Carrie Young. Carrie, what's going on, girl? How you doing today?
My husband's here too. He's just getting the kids. They're both waking up at the same time. So I actually took a lot of notes. It was really, really good. I love the first part when he said leadership can be learned. And I think about because a lot of times people start this business and they're a little nervous because they hear the word leader or like leading a team. And I think in the beginning, I wasn't nervous about it, but I don't think I understood that I had to lead, But then I started reading the developments and books. And I think just naturally, because I was growing myself, I was becoming a better leader, because I'm not the same person that I was when I started, and I would have never led my team the same. And I feel like I lead my team differently now than when I, even a year or two ago. And I loved, obviously, the 20-80 rule, and, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And it kind of reminded me of that story about the guy that went out and he talked to about 3,000 people. And of the 3,000 people, like 700 joined. And then of the 700 people that joined, 300 people did something, like they enrolled a loyal customer, or they did a party, or they did something. And then of the 300, I think it was like 11 people went on to make him a millionaire. And I think about that, and I actually pulled like the statistics in my organization, and it was super similar to that guy's thing. And we didn't become a millionaire because 300 people or 500 people or 4,000 were working. It was because there was 11 people doing, 80% of the work. Oh, that's because he stinks. Ashley pooped. And so I'm almost done. And the other one is success is learning to move in the opposite direction of an organ. Or I love the analogy of the plant pushing up. I was like, that's just such a cool thing, because so many people are stuck in their 9 to 5, and they want to do what our society teaches us, and they go to college and do all those things, and sometimes it's hard to just like get out of that, because that's just what everybody else is doing. And so and then the last one was, it's difficult to get past your lid. And so I'm continuously like thinking like, okay, how can like I do more? It's never like, how can my team do more? I'm like, okay, how can I read more books? Because I know like if I read 10, they'd at least read 2, and so I'm just trying to be better in every area. And then it allows them space, I think, to step up and become that leader that, they can be.
So good.
That was good. I really don't have much to say after that. I think you covered a lot of it, Chad, and I think Carrie also covered it. I was just excited to hear what she said, because she just came home from Zoom, and she was just so excited, and she shared so much. So I'll just be short. What I loved the most was exactly what she talked about, and you covered as well, Chad, when he said your leadership is the lid for your success. And then he says leaderships can be learned, and the great thing about being a human is that we can change, because we have the ability to make choices. I just thought that was so awesome, because I think a lot of people get put in leadership positions, and they think that they have to go into management mode, which meaning like their lid has to stay on the pot. They have to keep everything under a certain temperature under that pot. So for me, it was like, you don't have to sit and just be a leader. Just let your lid just sit on the pot. Like you can take that lid off the pot, and you can add multiple things. And I think when I put that into like perspective for me, is like, once I started to grow, I started to figure out there was more things that I was interested in. And just going back to, I had a verse that I wanted to share that just hit me. It was actually King Solomon. I just thought about that. He was known to be one of the wisest people ever. But the thing about him was when he first started, like God asked him, what is in the world that you want? And the thing that he said he wanted was basically guidance to lead your people, because he was like, I don't know how to lead your people. So he was humble enough to ask for like the wisdom to lead his people. And I thought what was so interesting about that, as I was reading the Bible, like he prayed for something that he didn't know. Like he wasn't talking about just the people for his day. Like to me, like that was him leaving a legacy. Because when I open Proverbs now and I read these things, and I can apply to like our daily living, and I just think about when he like prayed, how can I govern your people? Like he wasn't just talking about the people of this day. Like he was talking about generations down the line. So when I say you show up to be a better father, a better person, a better leader, like you're not talking about just for your team. Like you're setting an example for your kids. You're leaving a legacy with the way that you live your life now, and the leadership skills that you're going to develop. So I just love the fact that he said, give me the wisdom to govern your people. And me, like to this day, going back and read through Proverbs, like, man, this is so relevant, to what we're going on today. So he prayed for something, and God gave him much more than what he prayed for. So I think if you want to just become a better leader, then I think the thing that keeps hitting me within these Zooms, they're saying like you have to be honest and open with yourself. You have to be transparent. Like you have to deal with reality, and you have to understand like you can change that reality with just one decision. So for me, I think you really have to just pull back and just figure out like, why do you want the things that you want, and like what's holding you back? And if you can do that, and just deal with the reality of the circumstances you in, knowing like, hey, my circumstances, they're not who I am. Like, these just so I continue to grow. So I think you have to look for opportunities to grow within your circumstances and just continue to surround yourself with the right people. And I think just showing up to these Zooms for me is not just being able to just sit and be complacent where I am as a leader. It's getting on and just learning and just letting people know I'm still learning, and I'm learning along with you guys. And I think once you learn along with people, you just let them know like that I'm being transparent, and it allows them to just break down walls and just that they've set up over time. And this just open up their heart and their mind just to be able to receive a lot of the things that they get from these Zooms. So I just love the fact we can just come here and just continue to grow, and that we're just not sitting on the stove as a leader and just letting our lid just be where it is. We're not just comfortable with what the temperature is, but we're just looking for growth and just continue to spread that growth and knowledge that we get to others. So I just thought that was so awesome.
Man, so good. And Proverbs it's funny. It's one of those books because I haven't lately, but I used to just go through and read one proverb a day, just every day of the month. And it's like you go back through the same thing over and over and over, and you have this ongoing revelation where that one verse just hits you the right way at the right time in a fresh and new way. And I love that. And that's just a good reminder of I need to go back through there and get back in that. So thanks for sharing, Carrie and Tay. Man, love you guys. Let me see, get one or two more people on here. Hey, Noelle Cruz, how are you doing today? I just unmuted you. How's it going?
I'm good. I wasn't planning on talking today.
Ha-ha, surprise.
Well, I really don't have much to add. You covered so many different things, and Tay and Carrie, oh my gosh, always just a wealth of inspiration and wisdom. But, I love that John Maxwell talks about how leadership can be learned. And I feel like most of us leaders, I mean, maybe not you, Chad. I feel like you were pretty developed before you started this business, but most of us leaders were pretty raw when we first started this business, and it's really a trial and error process. And I know that I've learned a lot, and I'm obviously still in process and learning a ton every day. But I love having a team that stands behind me and will, grow with me and support my mistakes and my failures and my successes and all of those things, and just say, like, let's do this together. But yeah, I think that the law of the lid is a very, very real thing. And as we become better, just like Harry was talking about, how many books can I read? How many podcasts can I listen to? All of those things. And then my team will do a fraction of those things. And that is just how we get better as a team. So, but thank you for your leadership, getting on this Zoom when you're on vacation with your family. that is huge. So definitely appreciate you.
I figured if Tay can get on here in between flights, and hold the whole plane up, he's like, hey, just a few more minutes, I'm on a Zoom here, then I could get on during the So thank you, Noelle, for jumping on here. And I always appreciate you and everything that you have to share. So let me go. I'm going to throw one more person under the bus. I see her on here. The girl right there with the glasses, Mary Lisa. Hey. Mary Lisa, so I know you've been diving in head first. What's the takeaway you had from today?
I mean, pretty much everything that they have gone over, but the 80-20 rule is something that I've known about for a while. I actually have to work on implementing it better. But the law of the lid, I mean, we've talked about it before. I'm pretty sure that was one of your first personal development topics that you did. I don't know. It was in our leadership group a while ago, but just a good reminder that you must be willing to do the work necessary to make changes to become a better leader. And that can be hard, especially if you're new to personal development, because nobody likes working through the gritty, ugly stuff and admitting that you have flaws and weaknesses and things that you need to work on. So it's going to be days when it makes you upset, like when you're depressed and just like, wow, I'm a real crappy person. Like, I need a lot of improvement, but those growing pains are definitely worth it. So I think something that has helped me with my team in the like recent months is just sharing weaknesses with them and letting them know like, hey, I dropped the ball with this, like, sorry this has happened, and just, you know, taking responsibility for being weak and being red or being not so empathetic or understanding, but just letting them know that you're a human being and just like them, and they have flaws and you have flaws, so that they can connect on you or with you on another level, instead of them thinking that you're this superhuman robot that never makes any mistakes.
Yeah, I've never met a superhuman robot. You know, I think you nailed something there too, because it's very humbling. It's humbling to come to the realization that we don't have it all together, and that we are a work in progress. You know, I tell Tay all the time I should have a construction hat on every time here, because I could listen to 1,000 more Jim Rohn stories and a million more John Wooden books and John Maxwell and all that, and still not have arrived. Right? It's not about ever arriving. It's being a work in progress forever, and being quick to forgive and being quick to apologize when we jack it all up, because sometimes we're going to jack it all up. You know, we're going to make mistakes, and it's inevitable. And so just to have the personal fortitude and integrity and courage to admit quickly when we jack it all up and apologize, and to be forgiving. Forgive quickly, but trust slowly. That's what I've been taught. And I think that you want to definitely trust in increments. We don't want to give someone our whole heart right away where they could squash it, but trusting in increments, but being quick to forgive. So hope that helped some of you guys out today. Hope you got something good out of today. Thank you so much for all of you for jumping on here. And we're going to be back Thursday morning doing the same thing, talking more leadership stuff. So have a blessed, productive week, and we'll see y'all soon. Take care.